Okay guys, here we are. We are at week 1 for sewing, and we are making our O blocks. So that's what it says, O blocks. Well, it says O's blocks, so O's blocks. It don't matter. Okay, so our general instructions say that all of our seams are 1/4 inch unless otherwise noted. RST means right sides together. Those are pretty general instructions, which is great. And the fabric we are going to be using is our A fabric and our H fabric. And okay, so let's read through the instructions first real quick. Number 1, use 4A and 4H of the 6 1/4 inch squares, which are the bigger ones, to create half square triangle blocks. So HST means half square triangles. Each set of squares will yield 4 half square triangle blocks. Place A and H squares right sides together. Stitch 1/4 inch around all sides, just like this. So you see how it has it going all the way around? That's how you want to sew it, all the way around with them right sides together. Then you're going to cut diagonally, corner to corner, in both directions. So you're going to cut across this way, and then you're going to cut across this way. Then you're going to open them and press the seams either open or toward the red, whichever one you prefer. And we'll do that for all of the A and H squares. So once we're done, we're going to have a total of 16 half square triangle blocks when we're finished. And we're going to trim them to 3 1/4 inch squares. And they suggest using a block lock ruler. Okay. We'll get to that in a minute. Number 2, we're going to arrange the completed half square triangle blocks with the remaining square and rectangle blocks as shown in the diagram below. Okay, so what we'll have is we'll have the half square triangle blocks on the 4 corners, and then we're going to alternate between the red and then a white in the middle, which we have all over here, and that's what we will do. Now, once we have them all placed like this, it says, be careful to place the red rectangles as labeled. This is critical for the block to come together correctly. I think that what they mean is you want to make sure that your 4 inches are top and bottom, and then left to right, left to right. And once you're putting them all together, you'll kind of get that because you've got this 4 by 4 square in the middle. So the 4 inch, should just be lining up 4 inches according to this square. So that's basically what they're saying is don't accidentally turn it to the 3 3/4 because it won't line up. Okay, we're going to stitch together row 1, then row 2, then row 3, and then you're going to press your seams in row 1 to the right, row 2 to the left, and row 3 to the right. And we do that so that we can nest the seams as we are stitching rows 1, 2, and 3 together. And I'll show you how to do all of that. And then you can press those seams as you prefer once you have 1, 2, and 3 sewed together. And let's see, then we're going to finish the blocks at 10 1/2 inches when we're finished with that, and we will have 4 O blocks when we're completely done. Okay, so let me get my block lock rulers, just one moment. Okay, so I have more than one block lock ruler, but I can only find one right now. This is a 6 1/2 inch square one. So you can pretty much use any size. I'll show you how to use it. This is recommended by Fort Worth Fabric Studio, but absolutely do not have to use a block lock ruler. I'll show you with both because it's really, not that much different. The difference between a regular ruler and a block lock ruler is that if you take your after you do this cut, this 2 diagonal cuts, and you have your half square triangle blocks, if you press your seam to the red side, you will then have a sort of like a lip. You can feel where that lip is, where the seam is. And what this does is, if you see right here, there is this frosted piece, and on the bottom, it's going to be very difficult to show you in camera, but it has like a channel that was cut out and a really sharp point, not sharp like to cut you, but it'll catch on your seam. So what it'll do is, when you whenever you're cutting, you want to take your block lock and you want to put it to the top. You always want to do that. And then you pull it down, and that's how you would, you trim it based on where your seam is. Listen, it's easier if I show you while we're doing it. To me, it's easier and very self-explanatory once you get the hang of it. It's just, it catches on your seam so that it won't, your block won't move around while you're trying to trim it. That's basically how it works. Okay, so I'll put that aside for just a moment. And I'm going to take my 6 1/4 inch squares. And here they are. And then I'm going to put them right sides together, like so. It'd be easier if I can do it like this. If you start on one side, I find that you can line it up in the 2 corners and then on the bottom, and then the others will just fall into place. You can kind of eyeball it, make sure everything is nice. And then we are just going to stitch all the way around all 4 sides at 1/4 inch. Okay. Then I'm just going to lay this down at 1/4 inch. And what I like to do is, because when I'm going to mark this with a pin, the pin has, a certain width. And so if I put my 1/4 inch line directly on the fabric, it's going to push that mark out into the square, and you'll have actually larger than 1/4 inch done. And you don't want to do that. So what I do is, I always take my 1/4 inch mark and I put it just to the outside of the fabric, and I mark there. And then welcome to my world, guys. This is my house. Cats are nuts. So then I will also make sure that I stitch just to the inside, into the oh my goodness. Y'all, I'm serious. Don't get old. If it's not getting old, then Alzheimer's. I'm really not trying to make a joke. I know what the words are that I'm trying to say, but I can't remember what they are when I'm in the middle of a sentence. Seam allowance. So you want to stitch just to the right of your line in the seam allowance, not on the other side, because again, that will make your seam allowance larger than 1/4 inch, and you don't want to do that. Okay, so that's how I would mark mine, and that just gives me an easy way to go and stitch it. If you prefer to use the mark on your 1/4 inch foot, that's the way you prefer to do it, then by all means, please do that. This is just my preference. I prefer to mark lines. That's just me. everyone will find a way that they are most comfortable with when they are sewing, and you should find what that is and go with it. Even if you're watching someone do something different, you can always try it if you want, but if you find that you like a different way, by all means, do it the way you want to do it. You're the one sewing. It's your, you know, you're supposed to be happy sewing, and it's supposed to relax you and not stress you out. So just find the way that you prefer and do it that way. So I'm going to just finish marking these up exactly like this, and then I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch around and come back to do our cuts. Okay, so here I am with I have all my squares ready to go. I have all of my seam allowances marked, and here we go. I am just using white thread, and or you know, close to white-ish, whatever. And I am going to change my stitch length to 2.0 millimeters, and here we go. Okay, so I have these all sewed a 1/4 inch around the entire block, and now I'm going to go back to the cutting mat, and we are going to cut both sides diagonally. Okay, so here we are back, and we're going to do our diagonal cuts. So I'm going to take one at a time, and I'm just going to. The most important thing is to go where your lines are that your sewing lines. So you want to go diagonally across, and there we go. It would be better if I had, okay, it will be better if I could turn it. I'm just going to use this little one. Jeez, Jellybean! God. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to set that there. Make the first cut, and then I can just turn it so that nothing moves. And I'm just going to cut through that line that I sewed. To me, that's another good point about marking them, is because I can see it. All right, so now we have 4 pieces. I'm going to just scooch those aside for a moment. Okay, so I am going to show you on one piece how to press it toward the red side and then use your block lock to trim your pieces, okay? Let's see, I just want to make sure that I am remembering this correctly. Okay. All right, so when you have your piece, the first thing that you want to do is you'll just do one quick press with it just like this, so that you can close up all the holes that you just stitched open, because when we are stitching, we are punching holes in the fabric. So this will just kind of close it up just to get your seam a little bit tighter. Now we are going to be pressing these toward the red side. So whichever side you're going to be pressing toward, you want to put that part on top. And then you're going to flip it over, flip your top fabric over, if you can get them to come apart. just sort of finger press a little bit. I mean, it doesn't have to be crazy, just to kind of get them open. You don't want to push or anything like that, but you also don't want to have like a bump. Okay. Once you have that, you're going to want to press this, trim this to 3 3/4 inches. So if you take the block lock, and I'm trying to remember how to do this, guys. I think that the block lock logo wants to go to the other side of, hold on, I'm trying to, because it's going to catch, I'm trying to catch it, there you go. So you see how, like, if I push it down that way now, this little lip that's on the block lock is catching itself on the seam that you've just ironed. And so when you're cutting down to, in this instance, 3 3/4, you're going to see that you have 1, 2, 3, and then 3/4. So you want this little 3/4 line to be at the end of your fabric. So you'll just slide it down. Try, if I can get my fingernail under there, it'll help. And you see how you're getting closer and closer to the 3/4 mark? But I can push this way and it's not going to go past your thing, and then you'll catch it and bam, there it is. You want to go keep it on there a little bit because you're going to have the width of your rotary cutter. So this is going to trim up this side, and then you'll have that side. I probably should have put this. Let me put it on my, I never think about it until I'm smack in the middle of doing the cuts, and I know I'm going to have to turn it to do the other cuts. So let me see, I've got that there. It's locked in. See, I'm pushing. It's not going anywhere. And then I want to have, I'll push it up until the line is right there. And then you can see even on that side, you have it, but you want to go up a little bit because it's not quite on there. One side's a little bit better than the other, but it'll be okay. Okay, because I'd rather have it be just a little bit bigger than smaller. Do you know what I'm saying? So if I'm going to, if it's not quite right on one of the sides, you want to make sure that whichever side is closest without going smaller. You know what I'm saying? You don't want it to be small. In other words, I don't want to like measure to this one at 3 3/4 because now this one, the black line is below the fabric. So I'd rather err on the side of like that. Okay, so now that you have that locked, you know that that is, hold on, let me try to remember this. Okay, hold up. We have to trim both sides. So what I actually want to do is I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so that I'll have something to trim off the other side. That's what I do. All right, so here's the 3 3/4, there's the 3 3/4, and we know that there is still some fabric on either side. This is a good thing because we want to be able to trim off the little lip that's on the other side. So I'm going to trim here. I'll show you exactly what I'm saying. So I'm actually making it larger than it should be. Okay, because then we want to trim the other side because we want to get that little lip off too and have it all perfect. So, and now I want the 1 inch to be there. Okay, there we go. So now 1, 2, 3 3/4, and that's actually perfect now because it's right on the line exactly like it should be. So now we have this piece to trim off, and that'll also take the little, what do you guys call that, a dog ear, a lip? I don't know. And now it's perfect. So there we go. Now, that's how a block lock can really help you. You don't need to use the block lock though. I'll show you right now how we can do it without a block lock, if you don't have one, and maybe you can't afford to get that right now. So, understood. Where's my next? Oh, so I'm going to take my next one. And I'm going to do the same thing. And you can either press it over or you could do it open. In fact, let me show you open. Because actually, if you do it open, it'll lay flatter, and then you don't have to worry about having a lip while you're trying to make your, like, iron your pieces. And I do find that when you press it open, your pieces will lie flatter. I mean, it's just a fact. Because you don't have that extra bulk. Okay. And by the way, I could just like flip this over and cut on this side, but I want to use my rotary. So just explaining that. Okay, so let me see. Which is a good... That's not big enough. I don't think. Is it 3 and a... I guess it could be. It's 4.5. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is, you see how we have this 45-degree mark? I'm not sure about all rulers, guys. They may all have it, but I do know that Creative Grids does. Okay, so you want to be on that 45 degree. That 45 degree line will have to be exactly where your seam is. Okay, so I'm going to put that there. I want to use this one, I think. Yeah, I do. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm still going to need to find 3 1/4, but I want it to be a little bit bigger. So maybe I'll do it like 4 inches. Now, everything's all funky right now. Hold on. How can I do this? It's been a while since I've not used a block lock, I have to say. So just give me a second. 1, 2, 3 3/4 is right there. So maybe if I go just a little bit smaller, or leave it a little bit bigger so I can trim the other side. So now this is 1, 2, 3. It's more, so we should be fine. That'll be our first cut. Now, what you're doing, again, is your 45 degree line has to be right where your seam is, has to run straight up and down. And then this is going to be half, but I'm confusing the heck out of everyone, aren't I? I'm trying to make sure I'm putting it on the right side. You just want to make sure your finished is going to be 3 3/4. So you want to measure, let's say, 4 inches right now, so that when we flip around and get it down to the 3 3/4, you still have something that you can trim from the other side, so that we're making everything nice and square. Okay, so right now, say this is a half. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's a little bit bigger, so we're good. So I'm going to trim this, and I'm going to turn it and trim this way. Okay, I'm going to scooch those out of the way. Then I'm going to flip it around, and I'm going to again put that 45 degree line directly down your seam. And now we really need to measure 3 3/4. So 1, 2, 3, and we're right on the 3/4. So I want to pull it up just a little bit more, keeping it on the 3 3/4, keeping it on the 45 degree line. And then this will be, because this is a half, so I'm having to go half. So that's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's a little bit off, so I'm going to go and scooch it up just a little bit, keeping it on the 45 degree line. Okay, and that's pretty good right there. So now I'm going to trim this and trim this. And now you'll see, where'd my other one go? Oh, here it is. They're exactly the same, right? And I've done it just different ways. And they're exactly the same size. So it's just done in two different ways. So the block lock does make it easier, but you really don't need it. You can work it the other way. You just have to work the ruler and it won't hold in place like the block lock will. It could move if you, so you need to make sure you're just being a little more diligent when you're holding the ruler. Okay, so I'm going to finish them up and you guys are welcome to stay and watch. Okay, so I have finished trimming up my half square triangle blocks into 3 3/4 inch squares. And so I have 16 of those. And the next step will be arranging all of these so that they make the square that we need. So let's just make one according to this diagram right here. Hopefully you'll be able to see that. All right, so I'm going to put these guys in first real quick. All right, now the A squares are going to go right in the middle. So put that there. And then the H squares, remember these are rectangles, but they almost look square. So you want to make sure that your 4-inch side is hitting the middle square. So you want to make sure that it is the same size. This is a 4x4. So you want the 4-inch side, which I can tell this one's a little bit longer than this side, and you want all of the 4-inch sides to touch the white in the middle so that it will match up properly. Okay, so we're going to end up with 4 of these all together. The first step that we're going to do is we are going to sew these 3 together, 1/4 inch seam. Then we're going to sew these 3 together with 1/4 inch seams, and these 3 with 1/4 inch seams. Then we're going to take these rows, and we're going to press this row to the right, or did they say left first? It really doesn't matter as long as you alternate, but let's just look at what they say. Okay, row 1 to the right, row 2 to the left, and then row 3 to the right. And this, okay, so I'm back with the block layout, and we're ready to start joining our rows together. So I'm going to scooch these over for a moment, and I'll show you that what I'm going to do, I gotta leave that alone, is I'm going to mark my 1/4 inch seam on both sides where I'm going to attach them to the middle block. So let's do this one first. And again, I'm going to keep my 1/4 inch line just to the outside. Oops, that's the wrong one. Just to the outside of the fabric, because the width of the ink on the pen is going to make up for that. Okay, so that one's going to go there. Okay, and that one goes there. So I'm going to finish marking all of these so that I have them ready to go, and then we can head over to the sewing machine. Okay, so here I am with my helper Jellybean, and I'm going to sew my rows together, and I'm going to do them by chain piecing. And what that means is I'm going to stitch one, and I'm going to stitch like the right hand side of the row on all 4 blocks first, and then I'm going to cut, and then I'm going to attach the left side all in one go, and it just makes it easy. It makes it quicker to sew everything together. So that's what I'm doing, and I'll try to go a little slow in the beginning so you can see what I'm doing, and then I'll speed it along. I'm just using white thread. That was for my first block. Then I'm going to take the second one. And then I'll just run it right after the first one. I use a stiletto just to make sure that the fabric goes under my needle easily instead of getting all bunched up. It just prevents, it doesn't mean that that's always going to happen to your fabric. And I'm going to take the third one. You don't have to have a stiletto. You can use anything, a little pair of scissors, anything that you feel comfortable with. And the fourth one. Just going to cut them apart. And then I'm going to take them and I'm going to add the left side. And you can just lay it out. Just open these up, and it's gonna sew here. So I'm just gonna flip it over. And you do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so here I am back with the rows that I have just sewn together with you, and so each row is already sewed together, and now we need to press them, and there's a certain way we need to press them so that they will these seams here, the long ones, will nest together, and I'll show you all of that. So this is the bottom row. Just scooch it over for a moment. This is the middle row. This is our top row. The top row needs to be pressed to the right, okay? So I am going to take this guy, and this is our top row, okay? So that means that we want all of our seams to go to the right. And when we want that to happen, we need to make sure that our seam is facing up. So since we want it to press toward this way, which that's to the right, I'm just flipping it a little bit so that I can press it. You want to make sure the part that the direction that they're going to be going in, that part is toward the top. So I am going to have to make room for my iron. So I'm going to press that first seam just to set it. I'm going to flip it over. When you do that, you do want to make sure that you're not getting a bump in your fabric. You don't want to pull it, you just want to make sure you're not getting a bump. And we will press that. And again, we want to press it toward that way, so I'm going to make sure that the seam is going in that direction. And do the same thing where you just flip it up. You just want to make sure that you have no lumps. And then what I like to do is just press it from the other side. Okay. And also, I mean, I'll be honest with you, what I typically do, and you do not have to do this, it's a preference. I will just give it a tiny little bit of spray starch. And this is actually a very light starch. It is called Best Press. And when you're doing that, you just want to make sure you're lifting your iron up and down. You don't want to move it around and make the fabric stick. Okay, to me, that just makes it stay laying down much better when I'm having to put the blocks together, or the rows together, okay? Let me do the next one. Okay, so now we're ready to do the middle, and I want to make sure, first of all, that my words are facing up. I don't know where they're going to go, but I want to make sure. I don't know. I'm just going to do that with all of them, just to have something uniform going on. Okay, so now the middle row needs to be pressed towards the left. So I don't know why I care about that. Oh my goodness. Okay, so since I'm going to be pressing to the left, I want to move the left to the top. And other than that, it's exactly the same as pressing the top row. Okay, and finally we are at the third row, and we have done a right, then a left, so now we are doing a right again. So the right side will go to the top, and same as before. Okay, so I am done my pressing, and I'm ready to start putting them together so that we can sew the number 1 row to number 2, and then the number 3 to number 2, or 1, 2, 3, just sew them together. Okay, so I'm gonna flip them over, and we will get 1 and 2 ready first. So whenever we, let me see, I'm going to take just 1 off. That'll help. Okay, so when we are going to attach them together, we are going to sew them right sides together right here. So I'm going to flip them over, and then you can see, or you can definitely feel it, that there is a little nest in there. Now when you're, and what this is this seam and this seam are sort of butting up against each other. And so you want to make sure that all the way across, they are butted up against each other. Okay? And then once you have that side done, you want to feel it on the other side. And you can feel it just as well when it's laying down, which is good, because we're going to need to mark our seams. If you do that, if you don't do it, don't worry about it. I do. So I will show you how I do that. And I'm just sort of trying to see that the that they're close enough together. The top, see, that's off a bit, so I'm going to pull them up on this side. Still make sure that my seams are where they're supposed to be. And that's pretty good. If you actually get yours perfect, I want to come over and like give you a little pat on the back, because mine are never perfect. Okay, so when I'm marking, I will look at this, and since the one on the bottom is sticking out a little bit, that is going to be where the end of my seam is. I'm not going to mark it on the red, because then I'll be too far in and that won't be a quarter. So you just sort of want to just think about it logically. And I'm going to put the 1/4 inch just below the fabric. And you just want to make sure that it's, I mean, see, you're going to have, if you're like me, and maybe you're not, but I have this little error in probably the way I put it together, or there are any number of reasons because you're making so many connections here. So what I do is, in general, I make sure that I am at a 1/4 inch on both ends, and then in general all through the middle, because you don't want to pull something out because you can see up here that we're pretty even, and so you don't want to mess with that too much. At least this is the way I think. And then I'm just going to mark my seam allowance, same as I would on anything else. And whichever part you're marking on, you want to make sure you're holding down pretty good, just to make sure it doesn't move. And when you have a long line to draw, like this one, you could possibly get it to move a little bit. You don't want that to happen. All right, so once I pick it up, I personally, especially for long pieces like this, I definitely wonder clip it, because I don't want it to move. You can wonder clip it, you can use pins, whatever it is that you like to do. And if you don't normally mark your seams, you don't have to start now. If it's something you want to try, give it a go. If it's for you, awesome. If it's not, don't do it. We all have to find our own way to sew that we're comfortable with. So that's my advice. And I'm going to do the rest of those. But first I have to go do my laundry. So I'm going to go do that, and I'll come right back and I'll finish showing you the marking for these before we sew. Okay, so here are the rows 1 and 2 that I have just sewed together, and now I am going to press that seam, and then we're going to add row 3. Now they did mention on the instructions that we can press our seams as preferred on these, and my preference is always to press open, so that's what I'm going to do. But you can press up or down however you want to do it, if that's what you want to do. Okay, trying to get organized here. Okay, so here's my 1 and 2 sewed together, and now we're going to bring in our row 3. We're going to do the same thing. Let's see, where I take the top part, and I'll take one of these guys and flip it up. Okay, and just, it's easier for me to feel it this way, but I could feel the seams. All right, there's that one. And there's that one. Wow, this one looks great. I like when a plan comes together. That doesn't always happen for me. In fact, very rarely. I want to tell you that if you think that you have to be a perfect quilter, which is what I, obviously want to achieve like everybody else, it's just, I think after a while, you just realize that nobody's gonna see that. And you know what? It's so true. I mean, I can have the most horrible seam ever, and I will know it's there. But you know what? Even after, a few days or a few hours of just doing other sewing, even you forget about it. I'm not kidding. Like, you just need to let it go, because nothing is perfect. Nothing is perfect. Okay, so here I am back with the third row sewed on. Oops, that should go like that. And now I'm going to press the block. So here we go. Okay guys, so I actually put a ruler on top of one of my squares, and what did I do with the ruler? Oh, hold on. And mine are either right at 10.5 or a little less. So I'm just gonna leave them for now, and because this is always my problem with piecing. I am not the best piecer in the world, I'll be honest, and I always end up loving how my quilt turns out. So I just wait, and I'm gonna wait and see where they're being placed in the quilt at the end, and I'll make a decision at that point if I wanna do like some cleanup. That's usually all I'll do. What I'll do is I'll say, okay, I'm putting together this piece to that, to that, to that, whatever. Okay, and then I'll put them next to each other. And I do this with like everything. And I'll try to think, do I need to cut each side down by like 1/8 of an inch? And the thing is, if you're putting them all together and then you're cutting everything down to like a different size, then everything will be put together and that won't make that big of a difference. I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. I'm pretty good at it because, like I said, my blocks are always off. So I always end up trimming mine down a little bit more than they're even supposed to be. So even though this says 10.5, mine, that it's supposed to be 10.5 square, I may make mine 10.25 square. But I'll show you all that at the end. I'm not going to trim mine right now. And like I said, it's because I'm just one of those people that I do everything I possibly can to make them perfect, and they are never perfect. So at the end, I usually try to do just a little something. You try to not to do too much because you do have these 1/4 inches that you're trying to keep, and I'm very cognizant of that. So I also tend to sort of have to think about how I'm combining them or sewing them together as well. So we'll get to that at the end. Honestly, sometimes I just leave them like they are, and just like I did with the other ones, like if I'm going to show you, this one right here didn't come together all the way. So let's say I'm putting these two together, then what I would do is, thanks Jellybean, I would line up on the bottom as much as I can with everything, or as close as I possibly can. And I also look at how they're coming together on the sides. So these are all like little tips that I do. And then I will just, either I'll trim it, right? And then take into consideration whatever I trimmed, or I'll put the line down first. Like I'll mark my 1/4 inch so I know that it's a 1/4 inch, and this part is going to be sewed properly, correct? And then I'll do a little trim on the end so that it's clean and nice, and you just barely put a trim, and you already have your 1/4 inch line, so you know where it is. Like I said, I'll show you all this at the end, and just show you a way that I promise you, your quilt is going to be gorgeous. And there we go. Week 1. I am all finished, and I can't wait to see you guys for week 2. Jellybean too, apparently.